I'm Oliver and this is Deep Cuts, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Hope you're all doing well. We're now more than a month into the new Deep Cuts era. It's been really exciting and it's been amazing to see all the reactions from you guys. Thank you to all of you who watched the 9 Inch Nails video. A lot of work went into that, but it was really cool to see people excited that guides were back, and there will be more in the future. I just need to carve the time out to write them because they do take quite a lot of research. And also thanks to all of you who've signed up for the Substack. There are thousands of you reading my posts each week. I do a post every Tuesday and every Friday. Some of you are reading on the Substack app, some of you are reading by email, but basically just seeing the reactions to this new mode of Deep Cuts content has been really cool. If you want to join them, you can sign up for free and get a post every single Tuesday. So it might be an interview with an artist like I did with Joe Lally. It might be an essay on an industry topic, so like the live music scene from a few weeks ago, and also genre deep dives. So I did one on my ambient music obsession and did 30 records that have basically taken me on that journey. Paid subscribers get more, so every Friday I do an In My Ears post. That's basically my listening diary for the week before, so I review new records, old records, underappreciated gems that I've found, and then also those people get early access to the YouTube videos, they get access to the comment section, audio versions of videos, and a few other things as well. But anyway, on to today's video. I have 5 albums to get you into drone. As with many of the genres that I've covered on this series, and there are quite a few of them now if you go into the back catalogue, it's sometimes difficult to define a particular sound without branching off into numerous different artists and approaches and ideas. And I say all of this because even though drone is an established genre in of itself these days, it's also something which associates with and is used in countless other types of music. Drone metal, ambient drone, it plays a big part in minimalism. Shoegaze bands play with the idea of the drone. Fabled krautrockers and cosmic music legends like Neu, Cluster, Faust, the stuff John Cale was doing with the Velvet Underground, bands like Boris who blew their audiences away with walls of guitar amps spewing out massive distortion. The thunderous guitar orchestras of Glenn Branca. Side note, if you haven't listened to The Ascension yet, get that on your listening list now. The Weed Worshippers sleep in a record like Dope Smoker, or the sustained melancholy of William Basinski's The Disintegration Loops. Autechre played with expansive drones across much of their NTS sessions. And what groups all of these wildly varied artists together? It's a sustained, continuous tone, or chord, or cluster of notes, stretching them out until they seem almost infinite. But with all that in mind, how do we define drone and what effect it has in music? Now, rather than hearing more from me, let's hear from Harry Sword, who wrote this fantastic book on drone called Monolithic Undertow. The drone is a psychic talisman. Immersion in hypnotic and repetitive sounds allows us to step outside of ourselves, be it chant, a 120 decibel bee sting from sun, standing in front of the system as Jar Shaka drops a fresh dub, or going full headphone immersion with Hawkwind. I talked about this book in the Great Music Books video I did quite a long time ago. Couldn't recommend it enough. Watch the rest of this video, listen to the albums, and then if you want to delve even more into drone, get this. So with Harry's words ringing in our ears, here are 5 records to hypnotize you and immerse you, perhaps take you to as of yet unexplored planes in your psyche. Let's go on a trip. Number 1, Tony Conrad and Faust with Outside the Dream Syndicate, released in 1973. Released the same year as the mind-blowing Faust 4, a record that you can hear more about in the 5 albums to get you into krautrock video. This 1973 collaboration between US composer Tony Conrad and German group Faust is a heady and roiling place to begin our exploration of drone. It's a good place to start too because it connects us up to Lamonte Young's Theatre of Eternal Music, also known as the Dream Syndicate. Theatre of Eternal Music was this really off-the-wall avant-garde collective doing stuff that no other musical group was doing, formed by Lamonte Young in New York in 1962. All-night-long performances, blasting audiences into a sonic dream state, utilising minimalism, interwoven harmonies, and pieces that feel like they never end, or indeed ever began. And if you want a real insight into the analytical mind of Lamonte Young and the drone music that he was making, I've linked in the description to an essay that he wrote on the subject, which contains such mind-fucking sentences as: the harmonic structure will be characterized by the predominance of musical intervals of numerators and denominators in just intonation are factorable by the primes 7, 3 and 2 and selected higher primes, especially 31, and by the exclusion of intervals whose numerators and denominators are factorable by the prime 5. Yeah, I have absolutely no clue either. But I digress. Tony Conrad's sustained violin was a significant part of theatre of eternal music, and these seemingly unending passages that he would perform. Tony ended up listening to a couple of Faust records and really liked what this band were doing, and then he was eventually introduced to Uwe Nettelbeck and then agreed to record the band at their famous Wummer studio. It was released to little fanfare and got a bit of a bruising from critics. Here's Tony talking to the Quietus about his reaction to the reaction. It got slammed with a couple of small reviews in the press that said it was totally uncommercial, and that was the end of it. It showed up in a few cutout bins here and there. I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I liked both the parts, the one I had inaugurated and the one we did together. I have to agree with Tony and what he says about this being a beautiful record. Now, if you're new to drone or avant-garde music, we're not talking about, swooning romantic chord progressions, tinkling synths, or any of the traditional notions of what someone might define as beautiful music. But it carves out its own kind of alluring atmosphere. The unfaltering violin drone on the opening track, this is 27-minute long song, From the Side of Man to Womankind. That singular note scratches an itch that's sort of difficult to express in words. Why does it have the effect that it does? That endless note underscored by the march of hi-hat, kick, and snare. I should say this, and I will say this for all the records on this list, you need to listen with closed back headphones, or at the very least noise cancelling earphones, preferably with no other distractions around you. If you want the power and the influence of drone to take hold of you and really experience the music in a way that I think is probably intended, then you need to fully hand yourself over to it, and that is the best way to do it. Second track, The Side of the Machine, is more of a collaboration between Conrad and Faust, and it's a little bit livelier, a little bit sprightlier, the instrumentation's kind of a bit more in your face, but what underpins it is that violin, which is changing incrementally, but it's ever present. The record was re-released in the late 90s and has finally achieved the recognition of being a brilliant piece of work. Perhaps the music press and wider music world just wasn't really ready for that in 1973. Number 2, Ilian Redig with Trilogy Delmore, released in 1994. Often with these videos, I try to pick the least demanding records of the genre in order to try and help you ease yourself into this form of music that you might not have listened to before. But this is drone, right? Some of you are here to hopefully discover this style of music, and if that's the case, then you're in for very long pieces that change quite minimally. Hopefully you're willing to drop everything, stick some headphones on, and let this music take you on a journey. You're in it for the long haul. There's no easing in. So there's no point in us pussyfooting around. Let's just talk about the brilliant Trilogy Delmore by French composer Ilian Redig. And don't be put off by what is surely one of the jankiest album arts you're likely to see. I mean, especially because it's just so antithetical to the music itself. It just doesn't do any justice to this project. I know I'm repeating myself here, but you need to listen to this record on a pair of closed back headphones or noise cancelling earphones. You don't want distractions when you're listening to this. This project is meditative. There are moments where the bass is so deep it's barely audible. You have to surrender to this patient and glacially unfurling work in order to get something out of it. Ilian Redig is now 93 years old, a fascinating artist and composer, and really she should be called the mother of drone. Working as part of the music concrete movement in Paris, she was a student of the founder of the movement, Pierre Schaeffer, but her experimentation moved away from the principles of music concrete, and she began to work with tape loops before falling head over heels for analog synthesizers. And who can blame her, honestly? This is an artist that would pore over analog synthesis charts for weeks on end, trying to pinpoint the exact overtone or subharmonic that would perfectly fit a composition. This is revealed in the captivating and sometimes unsettling vistas that make up the nearly 3 hour, yes, nearly 3 hour Trilogy Delmore. The wind then turns into a breeze, the base of the earth into resonance, the crackling fire into peaceful source of heat, water, the surf against the bank, cooling like a stream. life is there. That's a quote from Eliane herself, and it's a useful one to dive into this mammoth record with. This 3-part release is composed on the ARP synthesizer and is essentially a meditation on life and death. The first hour-long piece, Kaima, is inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I'm getting this directly from the recording company Experimental Intermedia, who put this out, but what this says in the liner notes is, it invokes the 6 intermediate states that constitute the existential continuity of the being. It's a piece of music that begins with an emotionally ambiguous drone. Is it hopeful? Is it despondent? Kind of up to the listener to decide. But it has real moments of charged drama that creep into the soundscapes as Radid precisely forges this path through a subterranean world. The second track, Kailasha, is dedicated to Eliane's son, who died in a car accident. And there's also a double meaning here. So Mount Kailash is considered the most sacred of all the Himalayan mountains. And this piece is sort of Eliane's imagined pilgrimage to see it. An even moodier piece than the first, it really tugs at the heartstrings with these deep oscillations, but none more so than finale Kueme, which evokes the ultimate nature of death. The achingly deep bass drone that opens this track feels oppressive. You can really feel it on the weight of your chest as you listen. But if death isn't the end, then perhaps it doesn't have to be scary. And as you float along with this initially quite kind of imposing alien soundscape, it suddenly starts to become a lot more comforting. A masterpiece. Number 3, Earth with Earth 2, special low frequency version, released in 1993. Get ready to have your mind blown. Earth 2 by Seattle band Earth is, 32 years after release, one of the swampiest, heaviest records you are likely to hear. And yes, technically there have been heavier albums than this, depending on your definition of heavy, you know, blast beats galore or banshee screaming, whatever. But the minimalism, the pure focus on the singular distorted sounds and no other distractions makes this feel just monumental. There are no vocals, practically no percussion. Instead, all of the focus goes onto this ever-present, sluggish riffage drifting through a pool of feedback and distortion. I'm going to recommend another book at this point, J.R. Moore's Electric Wizards, which is a tapestry of heavy music, 1968 to the present. He talks really eloquently about Earth and Dylan Carlson and the kind of creation of that band. So another one to get on your bookshelf. So Dylan Carlson, a figure in the burgeoning Seattle music scene in the late 80s and early 90s. Best friend and roommate of Kurt Cobain, he was also the person who purchased the shotgun that Cobain used to take his own life. And unfortunately, that bit of trivia is sort of what defines Dylan Carlson to those people who haven't ever engaged with his music before. Apparently he convinced Dylan that he needed it for protection. Well, I can't imagine living with the knowledge of that. Anyway, Dylan's musical interests were pretty mixed. He was often seen sporting a Morbid Angel t-shirt. He was obsessed with Black Sabbath as a teenager, but he was also fascinated by the compositional skills of minimalist composers like Terry Riley and Lamonte Young, who we've already discussed in this video. So what you end up with on Earth 2 is a hybrid of those two different musical approaches. You have the oppressive distortion that you could only learn from listening to the heaviest albums of the moment, but this kind of sluggish, drugged delivery. You know, the incredible length of these 3 tracks means we have a record that's 1 hour and 13 minutes long, and across this time the rumbling drones, listless and slack, also have this gnawing anxiety about them. Dylan Carlson. Earth sort of was a response to, at the time, everyone was trying to be the fastest band on Earth, so we're like, oh, we're going to be slow. That deliberate focus arrives in the opening seconds of the first track, 7 Angels. These massive, fuzzy chords repeating with the slight variation of palm mutes. As the track drifts along, things get all the more sinister. Additional drones bring a greater weight to the sound, and the listener, with all this feedback, just feels like they're being pushed down on more and more. Middle track, Teeth of Lions Rule the Divine, is an even more challenging and dense track. Listening to this record will challenge your preconceptions of music and what it means to have structure and melody and harmony. And it's very different to, say, the Eliane Radid record, which often is quite beautiful, and those people who like ambient music will probably be able to find a path into drone by listening to that record. This ain't that. Final track like Golden Faceted brings the project to its conclusion. It's 30 minutes that basically renounces the riffage of the previous two tracks, and this time we have a feedback drone which washes over barely audible percussion. This is corrosive, often so much so that you might think your headphones or your speakers are going to sputter out and give up the ghost any moment in protest of being put through this. But man, what an experience. Number 4, Tim Hecker with Harmony and Ultraviolet, released in 2006. Okay, so right now you might be saying, okay, Oliver, I tried those first 3 records. They're really not for me. Maybe drone isn't for me. Hold 1 second, because if you're interested in electronic music, this might be the pathway into drone for you. You've probably come across Tim Hecker before if you've watched the channel. I included Rave Death 1972 in my 5 albums to get you into ambient video all those years ago. That's an absolute personal favorite of mine. I also wrote about Radio Amour in my recent Ambient Obsession Substack post. Hecker's a Canadian electronic ambient experimental minimalist composer who is so widely regarded. One listen to any of his projects, be it Rave Death, Virgins, Haunt Me, elicits a near biblical experience for the right kind of music lover. People who adore ambient, or those of you who have an appreciation for bleakly beautiful film scores, he is an absolute master at delivering this kind of auditory experience. Harmony in Ultraviolet is 50 minutes of vaporous sounds and textures that glide from passage to passage, often delivering these moments of serious emotional intensity, and then the next moment engulfing you in a flood of digital noise. Hecker on Making the Record. I have a hard drive full of mutated and morphed things that may have come from my own sources like piano and guitar, and other things that may have been pilfered. Romantic pianists or 1980s rock bands, and a whole other fog of sound samples and sources that I draw on and constantly change and use all the time. And it really does feel and sound like a fog. There's a point where these overpowered drones that have been so insistent on the track Spring Hill Jack Flies Tonight, they just part in order to reveal the delicate organ of Harmony in Blue 1. It's one of the many moments that contribute to this feeling that you are watching time weather a landscape. You know, it chipping away, providing pockets of levity as much as these terrifying monolithic acts of God. The tender finality of Blood Rainbow, I mean, it doesn't really get much more expressive than this. The gentle shifting of notes in flux with one another, high synths and low aching drones that inhale and exhale before fading out. And take a second to recall the album title, Harmony in Ultraviolet. Ultraviolet is hidden to the human eye. You can't see it. Just like those samples and sounds jutting out of the droney fog. Once you've listened to them, you can't quite recall them. But despite that, there's a harmony to all of these elements, all coming together to create one of Hecker's best records. And it's a stunning example of how drone can complement ambient, electronic, and minimalism. Number 5, Sun with Monoliths and Dimensions, released in 2009. There's absolutely no way we could have explored this genre without talking about the drone metal amp worshippers Sun. Chances are you've probably come across them before, but for those of you that haven't, here's a primer. Stephen O'Malley and Greg Anderson formed Sun in '98 in Seattle. Yes, the place Dylan Carlson birthed Earth. And that's not where the connection ends. Sun started essentially as a project of worship towards Carlson's band, this revelatory sound they discovered and were lucky enough to see live in the 90s. Since then, Sun's morphed into its own fully formed musical project, one which fuses volume and atmosphere into a kind of sonic ritual, where live performance becomes ceremonies and the boundary of music and experience dissolves into a thrum of sustained drones and transcendental distortion. Literal fog too. Like, I know I've talked about fog a couple of times in this video, and I think that's valid, but Sun take the ritualistic vibes to a whole nother level by donning robes on stage and shrouding themselves in dry ice. And the result is they look like some kind of, shamans or druids of tone communicating in earth-shaking drone that threatens to pull the ceiling down. They're also named after the Sun amplifiers, an important factor when you consider how essential the stacks of cabs are to the sound of the band. If you're not amplified from one side of the stage to the other, how are you supposed to to blast your audience into the back wall. As they've always said, maximum volume yields maximum results. Monoliths and Dimensions is Sun's 6th record, and it brings together a host of collaborators, including Earth's Dylan Carlson, which must have been quite the moment for the pair. And they bring these collaborators together to create this expanse of drone. And yes, the distorted guitars are ever present and crucial to the sound in the same way that the previous albums were, but this time they're flanked by wobbling synths, brass, Tibetan horns, a choir, and moments of clarity. The break 5 minutes into opening track Agata offers this glimmer of hope. The distortion fades away and you're like, okay, where's this going? Before Attila Ksiha's growling vocals begin and the next sustained chord drops you 30 feet below. Big Church's haunting choir mirrors the descending chords that are hanging in the air menacingly. Huntering and Gathering's huge brass section competes with the distorted chords, and it's such a moment and a welcome reprieve from the heaviness of the atmosphere. A resonant bell rings out to announce a sudden stop of the drones, and before you know where you are, they're right back there again, steadily crushing you. I think what strikes me is the emotion that the pair managed to get out of this patiently roiling sound. It's not something that I experienced the first time I listened to this record, but maybe after the 5th or 6th, I really felt it. As far as being a player in the music, the main emotion is transcendence when it's done right. And usually transcendence has a joy attached to it. And so despite all of the darkness of Monoliths and Dimensions, I too see something transcendental and therefore quite joyful in this music as an experience from the listener. You know, he's talking about the experience of playing, but I think some of that is transmitted to the listener as well. You know, especially on that genuinely beautiful finale, Alice. Those horns. As with most drone, to get this entire project, you really have to carve some time out and really give yourself to it. No distractions, no phone, just listen and take it in. And I think if you give this project that sort of focus and time, you may feel something truly amazing in return. All right, that's my 5 albums to get you into drone. Thank you so much for watching this video. I think it's probably the first 5 albums video that I've made in about 2.5 years. But for those of you who are new to the channel, there is a massive back catalogue of those to go and watch if you feel so inclined. In the meantime, I'll be back in a month with another video. If you'd like to hear from me between them, then you need to come to Substack and subscribe, and you'll get posts from me every week about different genres, reviews of new artists, and lots more. Thanks a lot. See you soon.